for coming out tonight to our Athletics Information Night. My name is Tom Goodspeed, and I'm the Director of Athletics and Physical Education here at Chadwick School. Athletics are an important part of Chadwick's culture, so it's no surprise that a high percentage of Chadwick graduates choose to go on to play sports in college. Many of our graduates play intramurals or club sports, and roughly 18% play on the varsity level, which is an extraordinarily high number for a school of our size. In the packet that I gave you guys in the back, it goes back to from last year all the way back to 2008 on all the athletes that have gone on to play varsity level from here. It's a very high number. We're hosting tonight's event in order to help our students consider how college athletics might fit into their college choices. This night is for you to hear from some professionals in the business in order to allow you to gain general information about college sports and college sports recruiting. We hope this will serve as a starting point for a conversation that will be continued with your coaches, where appropriate, and in all cases with your college counselors. We have a talented and dedicated group of coaches on our campus. They produce successful teams, and they work hard to do the best they can to have your kids have a successful high school experience. But they're also there to help you make decisions on playing in college. So it's up to you guys to talk to them and get their advice. They're there to help you talk to coaches, write recommendations, and talk to coaches. I'd like to thank our college counseling team and our Dolphin Booster Club for assisting the athletic department in presenting this evening. We have two guest speakers tonight. Each will present their perspective on different levels of college athletics and the recruiting process. Both have a broad range of experience. We also will hear from our college counseling team. Upon conclusion of our remarks, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. We welcome questions from parents, students, coaches, and administrators, whoever's around, whatever questions you have. We can have a nice, frank discussion and open it up to these guys to help you. This year's guest speakers are Ali Aguilar of Occidental College and Angel Gutierrez from Mater Dei High School. And our first speaker, we were having a little projector problem, so he's going to kind of wing it up here without the visual aids. But Angel Gutierrez is a counselor and NCAA coordinator at Mater Dei High School. A Mater Dei alumnus, Mr. Gutierrez played football for Brown University as a safety and outside linebacker. Prior to his position at Mater Dei, he was a school counselor at Paramount High School. Mr. Gutierrez earned his bachelor's degree in modern American history at Brown and went on to earn his master's degree in education and pupil personnel services at Azusa Pacific University. Please welcome Angel Gutierrez.
Thank you, guys. I promise you, I really did have a great keynote presentation put together with my use of technology. We have a one-to-one program over at Mater Dei, so the students are always teaching me cool new tricks, but just when you need technology to work for you, it doesn't want to work. So I sound like some of my students, right? I tried to submit it and it just didn't submit. So one other thing, I did graduate from Brown University and played football there as well. After I graduated, I moved to Arizona, and I coached a year of high school ball at Scottsdale Chaparral. We had a pretty successful season there in Scottsdale, and then after that, I went back to Brown University and coached a year of football back with my coaches, coaching the outside linebackers. So while I didn't go out on the road recruiting, I was there for the whole calendar, seeing off-season recruiting, during season recruiting, and just listening to telephone conversations and hosting like official visits with recruits and whatnot. And so I got to see that aspect of it. And that was a long time ago. So just yesterday, as I was driving home from work, I called my old coach and I said, hey, Coach Frizz, I'm coming to Chadwick School and I'm gonna go speak to some families about recruiting, and a lot of the kids, they go Ivy League or some similar schools. They're comparable to the Ivy Leagues. And so he gave me some good information to share with you all, but I'll touch on that later on in the presentation. But, I wanted to get down to the recruiting, the nuts and bolts of it, according to the NCAA, and in this presentation I had, it was going to be blasted up there for you guys, but I'm going to read it for you verbatim, okay? The NCAA's definition of recruiting, because it's always a gray area, We're not sure if we're getting recruited, and we don't know what constitutes being recruited, so please bear with me as I read this definition of recruiting according to the NCAA manual for the 2013-14 year. It says, recruiting is any solicitation of a prospective student athlete or a PSA's relatives by an institutional staff member or by a representative of the institutional's athletics interests for the purpose of securing the PSA's enrollment and ultimate participation in the institution's intercollegiate athletic program. Okay? So that's pretty plain forward, and that's the same across the board for all divisions, Division I, 1AA, Division II, and Division III. Okay? Now, how do you know if you're officially being recruited? Okay? Now, there has to be actions taken by, that representative from that institution. And we're not always sure if a certain action constitutes us being recruited, like getting a questionnaire. Is that being recruited? Not necessarily, but it's a good start, okay? One way that student athletes begin to be recruited is obviously they get invited on an official visit to that institution, okay? And on that official visit, that is paid by the institution, okay? All the expenses, the flights, the hotels, and everything is paid by them. And for Division I, okay, you can take up to a maximum of 5 official visits, okay? Now those 5 official visits, you can't go visit UCLA twice, okay? You only can go to one school one time, okay? So by the time you get to those 5 different schools, you're probably going to be burnt out going on official visits, and you're probably going to be missing a lot of school, and your teachers are going to be upset, your counselors are going to be upset, because you're just missing a lot of work and a lot of time to sit there and study. So hopefully, if you have the opportunity to take 5 visits, it's great, but the sooner you make a decision, the sooner you can get that stress off your shoulders and move forward in the right direction where you want to go. So the official visit is one way that students can go, and you can't take an official visit until the start of your senior year, okay? The only difference is for men's basketball, okay? Men's basketball can take an official visit after January 1st of their junior year, okay? I mean, the wonderful thing about sports is there's always some exceptions to the rules. In men's basketball, there's always an exception for men's basketball. Do we have any basketball players out here? Women's, men's? Okay, yeah, there's always men's basketball. There's always some exception, some sub-topic of the bylaw there, okay? Another thing, what constitutes the action by an institutional member as being actively recruited is they're setting up an arranged in-person off-campus visit, okay? That's typically a home visit, okay? And you hopefully know when a coach is gonna come knocking on your door, and wanting to visit you in your house. And that's usually a good indicator that they want you, And it's even better when the head guy comes, okay, or the head girl, okay? Because if you get the head guy or the head girl at your house, that means they really, really want you, okay? And if they've been doing this over a long time, since the time that they're able to start recruiting you, that's really a good indicator, okay? Sometimes you may have coaches that come in the very last minute and are trying to swoop in on an athlete, but, I like to go with the ones that have been with you consistently over time. You can trust them to be there, okay? Another way that you can tell if you're being actively recruited is initiating and arranging telephone, the phone call, okay? There's always these different periods throughout the recruiting calendar where sometimes coaches can't contact you, okay? So don't be discouraged if you get an email saying, yes, we're really interested in you as a prospective student athlete at our institution, and then you respond back, hey, coach, it's great, here's my phone number, give me a call. but then weeks go by and by and by, and you don't hear anything. Well, that's probably because it's a dead period or a quiet period and they can't contact you, and it's not that they don't want to call you. So usually a good thing to do is to provide your coach's contact number from your high school, okay? Because that college coach can contact your high school coach, okay? And so they can discuss things that are going on about you, okay? So you always want to make sure that you have multiple ways to be contacted, whether it's from your family or your coaches or yourself. You're always make sure you're available, okay? And the last way that you know that you're being recruited is obviously for an institution issuing a national letter of intent, okay? And the national letter of intent, it basically is a written offer of athletically related financial aid, okay? A scholarship, okay? So for Division I and Division II, they issue NLIs, but for Division IIIs, they do not issue NLIs, okay? So those are things that you can be aware of as if you're being officially recruited, okay? Now, one mode of, I really had something great here to show you guys, but sorry, I can't do it. It was the questionnaire. Okay, how many of us have seen questionnaires, gotten questionnaires, and filled out questionnaires on websites? You know, and those are great. You know, because it's recruiting material. It's getting your information in their system. You know, every university, college has their system database set up with all the athletes that fill out this information. You know, they ask for your demographic information, your weight, your height, your speeds, your times. How much you lift, stats, everything, okay? So everything is in there for them. So that way, when you get a phone call or they get a message from you, you say, "Hi, coach, this is so-and-so from Chadwick High School." They can easily look you up and see all your stats that you have available there for them, okay? So providing recruiting materials. A college can start to include general correspondence related to athletics to an individual or his parents until no later than September 1st at the beginning of their junior year, okay? So if you're a freshman or sophomore and you're wondering why you're not getting these materials, it's because you can't yet, okay? You have to wait until your junior year to start to get these materials, okay? Such as like media guides, sometimes are still coming through the mail. Programs, updates about certain games and whatnot, even electronic stuff that counts as recruited material, okay? Except in men's basketball, okay? In men's basketball, you can start to receive recruiting material after June 15th of your sophomore year in high school, okay? I just imagine men's basketball being this monstrosity because there's AAU teams and tournaments here and there, and they just play year-round, and you see these guys on high school and TV doing the McDonald's All-Star All-Americans. So it makes sense why there's always exceptions for basketball, okay? So just know the recruiting material is very important. It's usually a good indicator of being recruited, but a questionnaire, that's the kind of the basic of it, okay? And you can get questionnaires at any time. Okay, so that doesn't have to wait until your junior year. That can come freshman, sophomore, junior, even senior year, okay? So just know that. So one thing that I was talking with my coach with yesterday on the phone is, just refresh my memory, coach. I said, refresh my memory. What was it like? Because when I was recruited, it was probably way different, than it is now, And he says, everyone is looking for something different, Every team has a different culture. Every coach has a different philosophy, Every offense, they have a different scheme. Every defense has a different scheme, So it's all about, are you going to fit within that team? Are you going to fit in that environment? So if you're a student and you really, really want to go to Pac-12 school, okay? That's great, but the Pac-12 school also has to really, really want you as well. So it's good for you to be proactive and to contact them and send them highlights and to send them updates on games and schedules of where you're going to be playing and participating, but it has to be a fit, okay? Because one can't happen without the other. So they always look for something different, okay? Because another thing is talent's easy to evaluate, okay? And oftentimes these coaches, they go off of projections. They may see a young, raw student athlete, but might be 6'6", maybe 190 pounds, and they say, well, this kid will probably gain about 30, 40 pounds in a few years, and, hey, they run a 4.40, I bet you I can make them into a great student athlete, So it's not necessarily the kid with the best stats, because sometimes they might go off of, like, projections. What could this kid be in the next few years, Because unfortunately, you can't teach size, And it's hard to teach speed. I was slow, okay? I knew I was slow, but I was a smart student of the game, okay? So that's one thing that helped me out. So it's easy to see why some of these guys that kept coming up behind me in college, they're a lot taller than me, they're a lot faster than me, but that's how I just kept focused and stayed in the film room because I didn't want to lose my playing spot, okay? So talent is always easy to evaluate for these coaches. So what do they look for? They look for these intangibles, okay? And especially when it comes to recruiting, the intangibles of recruiting are making sure you're being held accountable, okay? Are you being held accountable for all your classes and for all your schoolwork, okay? Because if a coach comes on campus, one of the first things they come in my office all the time and asking about certain student athletes, and they say, what type of student is this kid, Because obviously if they're sitting in my office, they know this kid has talent athletically, but they want to know academically, what is this student like, okay? Are they consistently turning in quality work? Are they turning in late work all the time, or do they make excuses? They want to hear positive, good remarks, okay? Because you're going to be going to their institution, and you have to handle their academics and on a strict, rigid schedule, okay, for them. So it's the intangibles of being accountable, wanting to hear positive stuff, and also it's like, how do you know when you've stopped being recruited, okay? You stop being recruited kind of when the phone stops ringing, okay? Unfortunately, they're not always going to notify you when, hey, we moved on, but you know what's best when that phone stops ringing, it's time to move on as well, okay? I had an instance just recently within the past few years over at Mater Dei. We had a really high-profile student athlete, and he was being recruited by, top schools across the nation, and one school in particular. They were recruiting this kid since his junior year, and they knew he had all the talent in the world, but his academics, he could improve on, okay? So throughout the last 8 months, this kid's academics stayed the same. They didn't really improve, as much as this university wanted them to. So the coach was upset, and he was probably upset because the head guy was upset. The head guy was upset because the compliance office was probably upset, and the compliance office was probably upset because admissions was probably upset. So it keeps going up the ranks like that, and they're like, this kid can't get into our institution. We know he's a great athlete, but without him getting up his academics, he can't get into our institution. So it trickles down, And so the coach was really upset, said, I've been recruiting this kid for the past 9 months. You would think for the past 9 months, that would have been enough motivation for him to get his grades up, to get a full ride scholarship, and to come to our university. So luckily that coach wrote that all in an email, So we knew why that kid stopped being recruited by this university. And he was heartbroken, because that was his number one choice, but he lost that on his own, because he could have made that happen for him had he wanted it bad enough. So it goes both ways, If a college coach is really interested in you and you're not, let them know. Say, hey, coach, I really appreciate it, but I'm just not interested in your school, okay? And that's fine, because maybe they can spend their time and energy going elsewhere. Because these coaches, it's a network for them, They talk to each other. I mean, and I can speak specifically on Ivy League football, they talk to each other. They recruit the same kids. They go to the same high schools. Ivy League recruiting, it's this small, so you know the kid with a great GPA and with a great athletic skill, okay? And so does Harvard, and so does Columbia, and so does Dartmouth. And these coaches all talk to each other because they all go work summer camps together, So you want to be respectful even if you don't want to go to that school, because when they talk to each other, they want to hear even good things from other coaches, even though you may not end up going to one school. But hey, you have to give yourself that good name that you have, okay? And one other thing to remember when it comes to recruiting is Chadwick students will always represent Chadwick, okay? Throughout college, even past college, okay? We had an instance when I was playing football at Brown, and we had recruited a kid from Torrey Pines down in San Diego, okay? And he was the second Torrey Pines kid that we had recruited in 2 years. The first one quit, okay, after his sophomore year. Just said, hey, coach, I don't want to play anymore. I'm just not into it anymore. So they took another kid from Torrey Pines. That kid quit, okay? 2 years later, they just didn't want to play football anymore. And you know what? They still got to stay at Brown, finish their education, but I feel sorry for the other kids that want to go to Brown from Torrey Pines. Because I don't think we've had a Torrey Pines kid come through Brown in the last few years because of that. Because of the past 2 kids that we did have before then, they stopped playing or they just, they weren't in it anymore. So know that as a student athlete from Chadwick, if you go on and you play at a certain college, you're always going to represent this school, this community, and the kids that follow you, okay? So if you lose the love of the game, stick it out, okay? Because it's only 4 years that you really have to play, and then that's it, and you don't have to play afterwards anymore, okay? So there's a really good statistical data that I had of the probability of competing in professional college sports, from high school. And it's all numbers, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to email it to Tom, so that way if you wanted to share it on a website or whatnot, you can make sure everybody has this available. So it was short and sweet. Hopefully gave you guys some good insight about recruiting. I'll be up here, so if you have any questions more specific, I'll be here to answer them. So thank you.
Thank you, Angel. In the back of your packet, the very last page, I included 15 college coach turnoffs to avoid. So it's a good looking down through it. It fits in with our core values of respect and responsibility. And if you follow through with your core values as you're working with coaches and schools and administrators, you'll do fine. But as Coach just mentioned, if you drop the ball, you're representing Chadwick School, and it goes back to hurt the people that are trying to get in that school from future years. Next up, we have, and I failed to mention her last name when I was talking earlier, but Allie Heinel is the head softball coach at Occidental College. Allie enters her second season as the head coach of the Tigers. Prior to the 2013 season, she was the head softball coach at NCAA Division III Concordia University, Chicago, for 3 years. In 3 seasons with Concordia, the Rolling Hills Estates native, yes, she is from Rolling Hills Estate, tied and broke the school's single-season win record in back-to-back seasons and made their first Northern Athletics Conference postseason tournament. 10 of her players were recognized on all conference teams. With Concordia, Heinel also served as the senior women administrator, the director of compliance in the athletic department, and as an adjunct English professor. She was an assistant coach at St. Mary's, Washington College, and her alma mater, the University of Illinois at Chicago, before her tenure with the Cougars. Please welcome Coach Heinel.
Good evening. It's great to be here tonight. I was happy to have an excuse to visit my parents tonight and have a dinner cooked by someone other than myself. So you know a little bit about my bio, and I'm happy to talk during the question and answer time about Division I as well as Division III, and certainly about the Oxy experience. I could talk all night about Oxy, but I'm really going to try to focus on the Division III experience. When you think about college athletics, I think most people instantly think about Alabama football or UCLA softball or any Big East, Big Ten, Pac-12, SEC team. Those are the teams we see on TV. Those are the very visible teams to us. Division I has over 300 athletic programs. We're nothing like these programs. Division II consists of about 200 schools, like UC San Diego, Humboldt State, Cal State LA. We're not very much like those schools either. What many people don't realize is that Division III consists of 450 schools, and we are growing. We are the largest division of the NCAA. As California residents, Division III schools may be somewhat unknown to you. We have 10 Division III schools in California, 9 of which compete in the SCIAC conference. So schools like Redlands, the Claremont schools, Pomona-Pitzer, Cal Lutheran, Chapman, to name a few, and of course, Occidental. If you lived on the East Coast, or even in certain parts of the Midwest, Division III schools would be scattered all over your community. If you lived in New York, Division III schools would be on every street corner. Division III schools aren't just small schools. We have Division III represented in Wisconsin and New Jersey, public schools that have over 20,000 students in their enrollment. So, needless to say, there is a diverse set of Division III schools, and I believe the right fit for everyone. One of the most recognizable characteristics of Division III is the fact that we don't offer athletic scholarships, which is why we play by slightly different rules than Division I and II. The most obvious being that we don't offer a national letter of intent because we're not offering athletic scholarships. So that's an important piece of the puzzle as you begin to talk with Division III schools. Know that they simply do not have athletic scholarships to offer you. They do, however, offer merit-based scholarships and certainly need-based scholarships. Institutions choose to be Division III because of the Division III philosophy. The philosophy includes balance. Our student athletes are scholars and athletes. Their athletic experience is meant to complement their academic experience. Another piece of our philosophy is the breadth of opportunity. Our student athletes have jobs. They're members of clubs. They do internships. They might play more than one sport. They might participate in club sports. They might participate in Greek life. Anything under the sun that piques their interest, they're encouraged to experience. George Steinbrenner, who is a Williams grad, once said, "One can drink from all fountains on campus." And he really understood the Division III experience, that Division III student athletes can participate in every facet of student life. The last, and I think most special piece of our Division III philosophy is that Division III can boast true amateurism. Our student athletes participate for love of their sport. Now, to be very clear, Division III is not simply about participation. Division III is very much about competition. Our athletes have a pure desire to win and to be great at what they do, to create a tradition of excellence for their program and for their college. Competition begins with the recruitment process. A few years back, the New York Times did a series on the Division III recruitment process. They followed the recruitment cycle of Haverford's lacrosse coach. And the coach began with 1,000 prospects. They contacted 1,000 prospects. Out of those prospects, 500 replied. Out of those 500, 250 prospects were ballpark admissible academically. 100 visited, 50 applied, 25 were accepted, and 5 committed. So it's a pretty big differential from 1,000 prospects to 5 committed student athletes. So finding the right fit for that small number of student athletes at a school is, in my opinion, a puzzle. You're looking for the right academic fit, you're looking for the right athletic fit, the right social fit, and these days you're looking for the right fiscal fit. It's competitive for coaches, it's extremely competitive for student athletes. And the most important piece of this is finding that perfect fit for the puzzle. So academically, as you search for colleges, it needs to be the absolute top priority to find the right academic fit. I don't expect that all high school students have an idea, or certainly they don't have their intended major set in stone. So I recommend for high school students to just kind of create a little list. Maybe they are dead set on being a biology major. That's great. But have at least one or maybe even several ideas for majors. And as you research colleges, make sure they have that major. If you want to be an engineering major and you're looking at liberal arts colleges, make sure they have that engineering major, because it's pretty rare, but many do, I will say that. Make sure your GPA and your test scores coincide with a school's academic rigor. If you're earning a 2,200 on the SAT, that tells me that you're looking for a college that is going to challenge you academically and meet your high academic expectations. Academics isn't just about classes offered either. It's also about internship opportunities and career advancement opportunities. So as you research schools, look into that. Is there a study abroad program that you're interested in? Or does that school have a strong alumni network that will help you break into your field once you graduate? I have one of my student athletes, I think, is a great example of finding just the right academic, athletic, social, and fiscal fit. She's a senior this year. She spent last fall studying abroad in Costa Rica. She returned from Costa Rica and spent 6 weeks doing an internship, a 40-hour-a-week internship at Children's Hospital in LA, shadowing doctors. She was one of 18 undergraduates to have this opportunity. She then began softball season. She made all SCIAC. She performed with our dance production team. And this May, she will graduate with a degree in microbiology, and she will have her plan for med school set out. She's in the process of applying right now, and she has every expectation of getting in. So that's just a glimpse of what that perfect fit looks like. Academics is another piece of the puzzle. You need to think about if you are looking for a large school, a small school, a school in a rural environment, a school in an urban environment. You need to research the culture of the program. Are you looking at a program that has a rich tradition, one with national championships and one that's competing on a national stage every year? Or are you looking for a program that's perhaps younger, maybe building their tradition, maybe a place where you can walk in and create the tradition of that program? And the answer is going to be different for every student athlete. So it's important that your athletes are starting to think about what they want their college experience to look like. With that, ask coaches what their needs are. Do they already have 6 shortstops and no room for a 7th? Or is shortstop a top priority? Ask coaches what their philosophy is when it comes to playing time. and what your expectations are when it comes to playing time. Some coaches might tell you, well, we try to keep a balance, we try to make sure we get everybody in, our seniors typically start and freshmen have to work their way up. If you ask me what my coaching philosophy is, it's pretty simple. On game day, the best 9 softball players will take the field, because every day I'm working to win. And there are a lot of different coaches between those two ends of the spectrum. So it's important to ask and to think about whether or not you like what that coach has to say, because their philosophy is not going to change. It's something that you're buying into when you become a part of that program. The next piece of the puzzle is the social environment. That would include student population. It would include that urban environment versus rural environment. It would include whether or not there are parties on campus. Is it a dry campus? Do we have co-ed dorms? All those sort of superficial components are actually very important to your experience in college. So I recommend visiting. I recommend asking current students and definitely student athletes about their experience, about what they do on the weekends, about what their study habits are like. Even ask, how's the food? That's important. You have to eat in college. The last and definitely not least piece of the puzzle is the fiscal component. And these days, I would venture to say it's the most important in terms of the deciding factor for people when they decide on college. Knowing that there aren't any athletic scholarships, research financial aid options. Find out what the typical merit scholarships are for that school. Find out if you qualify for need-based financial aid. And I recommend having frequent and early conversations with the financial aid department about that, because the more you communicate with that department, the more information goes into that student athlete's file, and the more consideration they will get. So in looking for that perfect fit, here's my advice to you. Number one, it's never too early to start. And for you parents in the room who maybe have younger children, I would highly recommend not filming a recruiting video for your 3rd grader just yet. Hold off on that. Save your recruitment efforts for your high school age students, but have conversations early on. Bring younger kids to a campus visit. It's really never too early to start that dialogue, but I would save recruitment efforts for high school. For some students, that might mean your freshman year you start contacting coaches. At the Division III level, we can talk with freshmen. We can make phone calls, we can send emails. It's one little edge we have over Division I and II. It's also not too late. If there are any parents of seniors in the room, it's not too late if you're a senior. For Division III, we follow our admissions deadlines. So for Oxy, our first early decision deadline is in November. Our second early decision deadline is in January. And our our regular decision deadline is in March. So you have a lot of time to research schools, visit, and ultimately make your decision. With that, I highly recommend visiting as many colleges as you possibly can. And that doesn't necessarily need to be the overnight 48-hour visit. It could be a Saturday visit, but whether you're touring the East Coast or touring the SCIAC, the more schools you have to compare, the better you will be when you have to make that decision. Last but certainly not least, do your homework. Obviously, you're all here for a reason. You're interested in your student athlete taking that next step to college. And I'm glad to see that many of them are not here tonight, because I hear they're doing their homework. And that's important for them to have choices when they make that college decision. But when I say do your homework, research each school. The web will tell you a lot about financial aid, about admissions requirements. It will even tell you quite a bit about the social climate at a school. And the responsibility should really be on the student athlete. The student athlete is the person that's going to spend 4 years at the college of their choice. And you hope that when they leave college after their 4 years, they have a warmth in their heart, they have great memories, they have great friends, and most importantly, they have a degree that's going to allow them to pursue their career goals. So for parents, be the support staff, help them analyze, guide them, direct them, give them advice, but really put the work on the students, because for them, they need to have that responsibility, the accountability, and the ownership of their college choice. So I thank you for listening to me talk about the Division III experience, and I wish you all the best of luck as you look for that perfect college fit.
Thank you, Allie. Hey, I want to emphasize a little bit the last thing that she talked about, and that is the coaches want to hear from your son or daughter. They do not want to hear from the parent. They want to know who that young woman or young gentleman is and what kind of character they have and follow through. Last year we had the water polo coach from UCLA up here, and he's like, we want to talk to the kid. You know, too many calls from the parents drives them crazy, honestly. So that's why I think Allie's advice is they need to take ownership, and they need to be proactive, and they need to talk to those coaches on their own and communicate with them. You can facilitate, help out all you want, and that's fantastic, but they really want to hear from those kids to learn who they are and what they can do. Lastly, tonight, before we open it up, I want to introduce our college counseling team to get their perspective. We're a team. We work together to help your kids figure out the best place for them to follow Chadwick. And so I work with my coaches, and anytime kids express interest, they talk with me. I get it up to the college counseling office, and we go back and forth and help each other out quite a bit. So I think it's fitting to have them say a few words, and I'm going to introduce Bruce Pock, who'll say a few words.
Well, the first thing I want to do is introduce at least two-thirds of the rest of the team. Carol Bernstein, many of you know, Marion Hirsch, who also is a survivor of a D3 program, who can tell you about that. And I really do want to emphasize the notion of this being a very coordinated teamwork effort between the coaches and the college counseling office. But part of that partnership, part of the most important part of that partnership, is that we all communicate with each other so that we all know what's going on to the fullest extent possible, so that nobody missteps. So that if there are conversations going on with coaches, you let us know, because it may, in fact, have an impact on the shape of those college lists as they move forward. If there is a sudden moment when there is silence at the other end of that phone call, I mean, I think about the takeaways that I have from tonight, when suddenly you're not getting the call. This is an experience you just must understand, and I've spoken to some of the grade level meetings we've had. It occasionally may feel, for the student, that they're at sort of the other end of what the adults may know as, you know, the frat boy at the singles bar who's working you really hard and then all of a sudden doesn't call. Students have had the experience of going very, very far. I know this year, and it was not Chadwick students, fortunately, who even went so far as having a letter of intent arriving after a recruitment process that began in the beginning of the junior year at a very famous university, and suddenly was told after the application went in, sorry, this is not what we're going to do. So this student had put all their eggs in that basket, and it seemed very unfair. And again, it went on for a very, very long time when suddenly things changed. So it's really important that there be a plan B that's part of this. And in any place, as you're moving through this process, any place, you have to ask yourself the really hard question: would I want to go there anyway? Is this a place that fits with my learning style, my social style, my overall needs? Is the food good enough? Is the environment such that I can really engage in this? One of the things, what I heard tonight was there's the process, which is a very ordered process, particularly for D1. There are things that will happen. You can go to the NCAA website and have a very good preview of how that will all work. There's also the process of exploration, and much of what you heard is about the kind of advice that you would get from the college counseling office generally, although I have to say I wouldn't urge you to start looking and visiting colleges too much in ninth grade. You don't want to get too far ahead because a lot of developmental changes happen and a lot of athletic changes happen and a lot of academic interests shift. There are colleges that, in this paradox of size, it's kind of fascinating. People would think of a University of Michigan as an enormously athletically engaged place. And it is, if you're a spectator. In fact, probably only about 6 or 7% of the students are varsity athletes. You look at a Williams College and it's about 40% of the students are varsity athletes. So part of what a student may ask is, do I want to participate or spectate? And in some places that may be a binary. It's an either or kind of a question. Athletic culture can infuse a place with all sorts of life that really does affect relationships and pull people into other opportunities, but you have to find out, how do I want to manage all of that? It's an interesting set of challenges, and I think it surprises people as they dig a little bit beneath the surface to figure out what those things may mean. The small colleges may open up some of those different opportunities. I know of many D1 prospective athletes who are very, very taken by an institution where they have every opportunity that's available to every other student academically. They can major in anything. They may be warned, there's certain things that may slow you down. It may take 5 years to get your degree in some areas. But there are some D1 schools that will say, absolutely, you can only major in these 2 things. Now, that's a serious choice that a student will have to make. Do you want to go and participate in that program so badly that you may be willing to sacrifice your academic interests? Are you going on for a professional career in this sport? I mean, is this something that really may be important to you, that important to you long-term, that you may let go of your wish to be an engineer or a doctor? I mean, those are some fundamental questions, and you don't want to answer those in ninth grade, but you want to know that these are things that you can explore in your conversations with coaches, and you should really try to have as good and open a set of conversations about those possibilities and those limitations that may come as you move forward. The parent's role is an interesting one, and I can tell you even at the D3 level that we would occasionally encounter folks who played the Jerry Maguire role. Most of you probably remember that film with Tom Cruise. Show me the money. The parents who were acting, or like Arliss, the super agent, who was stepping into conversations and actually blocking the direct communication between the student and the athlete. Parents should be back there helping lay all the groundwork, helping train their child to speak and engage and do their own representation. They should help them make decisions. But if they get in between the student and the coach too much, I can tell you it's sort of like a traditional marriage question. Are you going to marry the family? And I've had coaches, sometimes for students who lived nearby, and more particularly whose parents lived nearby, said, this is a great athlete, this is a great kid, I just don't want to deal with this for 4 years. So there is a funny line one doesn't want to dance on in order to make this really work for the student to have the most opportunity. Finally, let me say this. The New York Times series was mentioned, and I provided some reprints that were out on the table by the coffee and the refreshments. If there are none left, please let me know, and I can send you a PDF or get you more of a reprint. It really is an interesting series, and I think in fact, it was an award-winning series. It went on for quite a time and had a depth and texture, and even though it is now about 8 years old, I believe, I think it will give you a really good sense of the way things work. And now I think you want us to open up to Q&A, Tom? Is that right? Okay.
So, does anybody have questions for our great panel here? Yes.
I don't know this firsthand, but I've heard some say that some sports, sometimes the club coaches are at least as influential, if not more influential than the high school coaches. How do they get involved in the process, if that is in fact even true? I think I heard that from one of them.
Does anyone want to address that? Allie? You can just stay right there.
Okay, that's great. In the sport of softball, I can tell you that club coaches are more influential than high school coaches, and I think it varies. I would think volleyball and possibly basketball, that would be the case as well. For college coaches, it's no different for me if I call a high school coach versus a club coach. I get tons and tons of emails from club coaches sending me their rosters, which typically include academic information, positions, even family information. So they can be very helpful, and if you're involved in one of those sports where the club coach is so highly involved, use them. Ask them to make phone calls to college coaches. At least for softball, I know the names of the top 25, probably the top 50 head coaches of travel teams in the country. So when somebody calls me and I know who it is and they tell me, okay, this kid's a great kid, you need to recruit her, that carries a lot of weight for me. So I would encourage you to maximize the amount of effort your club coach is willing to give you.
Do they get exposure to the Chadwick admissions team? This sort of Chadwick question.
To the college counseling?
Yeah.
In the past, not always, but it's really, really, really helpful to include us in that loop, and for the parents or the student to let us know that relationship exists. How much time and energy is going into it will probably be obvious as we talk to students and get to know them and their efforts and their time after school. But it's really important to let us know and to let the coaches at Chadwick School know. This is not, a jealously constructed set of relationships. It's really meant to be a partnership. And the more we know and the more we're on the same page, the more we can make sure is really represented from every angle, because the coaches will call their admissions office will call the college counselors, and if suddenly we're in the position of not knowing that a student is in fact somebody of great interest athletically and has this really great talent, not measured by what they say, but by validation of an external sort that's really important, then it can matter. I mean, I'll tell you, I've seen some Chadwick kids who think of themselves as really blue chip athletes, and sometimes in the context of Chadwick they are, but then all of a sudden, 5'5" D1 basketball doesn't quite work if you're a guy necessarily. So there are very different responses, and we're trying to work together.
Okay, Angela.
I wanted to speak on the whole club versus high school sports for a while. I mean, I'm not a coach whatsoever, but this is just my thoughts. Tom and I were kind of discussing this earlier on. I feel the purpose of being recruited, whether you play for the top club team or you play for the mid-level, mid-tier high school team, is getting exposure, okay? If you're playing for the top club team, are you going to play? Are you going to get that exposure? Or are you going to ride the pine? Unfortunately, that happens. Now, you can play for the best club team in the nation, but I feel for a coach, if they don't have any film on you, if they haven't seen you play, what good is that in a sense, versus watching you play high school, even if it's not for, say, modern day basketball, where, top 5 kids usually go D1, as long as you're playing, as long as you're making plays, you can get film out, you can watch yourself and get out to the coaches. I mean, I feel that's important as well. So whether it's through the club or through the high school, I think it's important to just get yourself out there, that exposure, that film playing. Because if you're not playing, it's kind of hard to evaluate. Okay, so regardless what a club or high school coach may say, I think that's just a good thing to also consider.
I'll also say one thing too, that coaches are really good at ascertaining talent. So if you have good film that are getting good, they're getting good exposure because they're playing, and the coaches, if you put together your film and your resume and you send it in, and they see, we have coaches that have contacts as well, and they'll look, and if they can tell if a kid has talent, whether they're playing on a club team or a high school team or a travel ball team. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, Alex, since I have a softball player next year, when did you start looking at talent? Sophomore year, junior year, where do you find them? Do you go to showcases? Particularly at the Division III?
I start looking, I focus my efforts on juniors and seniors, but any freshman or sophomore that contacts me, I will make an effort to see. I go to every local exposure tournament, which for softball can be huge. In Huntington Beach, in West Covina, they have huge tournaments. So I will go to places where I could see the maximum of number of kids possible. I have had students contact me from Chicago. I can't make a trip to Chicago on my Division III budget to see one kid, but a video goes a long way for me, and it doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to have background music and smoke and zoom in. A simple video from a phone is good enough for me. You could put it on YouTube and send a coach a link. That's a great way to get seen, whether you're local or not. But definitely the most exposure you can get, the better, because you never know what is going to work for a college coach. It's really easy for me to go to Huntington Beach and watch 400 kids play in a day, but if you're looking at East Coast schools, it's not so easy for them. So I would do both, the video and the tournament.
Who was first? I can't know. Yes?
I hope I didn't miss this, but can you explain the difference between the Ivy League division versus Division III? Did you touch upon it?
Well, I didn't talk much about Ivy League. Ivy League is Division I. It is. And they don't offer athletic scholarships. They sometimes have pull with admissions, and it's getting tough.
So yeah, I mean, Ivy League is a Division I AA. Some sports do participate in post-season tournaments, like, you know, NIT, or maybe you see like maybe Princeton in the, you know, March Madness tournament. Football does not. Football is just a 10-season sport, and then that's it. So yeah, they do not offer athletic scholarships, but being recruited for athletic purposes could help out with admissions. But you definitely have to have the academics, because like I said, a lot has changed within when I was a student athlete and how it is now. It's getting a lot tougher for coaches to get kids in. I do know at the Ivy League level, they do not follow a sliding scale, you know, so where your Division 1A school, 1AA schools, D2 schools, they'll use the sliding scale where, you know, the higher the GPA, the lower the test score can be, or the lower the GPA, the higher the test score has to be in terms of eligibility. Ivy League does not have that. They have what's called an academic index. It's a lot more complicated, and I used to know it, but I just would have to refresh my memory with that. But they recruit kids in bands. They got your high band, your mid band, your low band, and your under band. Okay, and in terms of football, they were allotted a certain number of kids in those different bands. Obviously, your high band kids are your 4 or 5 kids with maybe perfect SAT scores, you know, and they could have a good number of those high band kids versus your low band kids who may have not had as strong as academics, but, you know, could get through admissions. That's a very, very few number of kids that they can get in. So those are a few of the things that I do remember about the Ivy League.
I mean, if you can get on a coach's list, get into one of those bands, or get in with a D3 coach, it will help. It can help a lot in the admission process, for sure. Okay, who is next? Joe? Or?
This has to do with the comments that you made about film. I knew a guy once who put together a great DVD with the background music and everything, and it was his son essentially shooting during games. And the feedback he got from a coach was, we want to see a whole game. And so I'd like to understand better what should be in the film.
Yeah, highlight versus a game.
The most obvious one, make sure that they identify their number on the jersey. Because we've seen, I mean, you've probably seen this, where kids send in stuff and you don't know who you're looking for.
That's one thing that you can do, is you can put in the arrow during the play so they're following the right guy. But yeah, my experience is they want at least a half, if it's a football, or a couple games, and then you can break down a highlight to show some spectacular plays here and there to show their ability. We will, like, for example, we will help you with that because most of our guys film their games. Football, for example, we're up there filming, and we have to do it for the CIF. We have to film our games, and we share them with our league, and we share them with when we go into playoffs. So when it comes to that point, your son or daughter can come into the coach and say, I would like to make a highlight tape. Help me out. Help me figure out the best half that I played or the best game that highlights my talents. And they can assist in that. Do you guys want to say anything along those?
I also think it varies sport to sport. For basketball, you certainly want to see how a player behaves from the beginning to the end of the game. For a sport like softball, a simple pitching video is great for me because I can see the pitching mechanics that I'm looking for. Sometimes I get videos of a player's 4 at-bats that she maybe had in a softball game. I don't need to see what happens next. I know she got a hit, and that's great. So that's enough for me. The other thing that I really like is to get, even if it's a video clip from a phone that comes from a game. So a player might email me, hey, coach, I had a game last Tuesday. I hit 2 home runs, and here they are. And so even if it's a 30-second clip of a highlight, that's great in addition to or instead of that full recruiting video.
Now, in my 1 year as a college coach, I watched tons of high school film. We would sit together as a staff, and we would watch just tons of film. And I can tell you the first thing the head coach did was he took out the volume cord, okay, because he didn't care for the music or for the kid's 5-minute introduction of himself or whatnot, you know. Good face shot is good. Yes, the number's always great. You know, you could even put the circle when the play is beginning now. But I feel from any sport like lacrosse, football, where you're playing on a field, you know, you have the sideline shot and then you have the end zone shot. Okay, your sideline shot is supposed to include everybody. You know, it includes your outside guys from your deepest guys as well. Where your tight shot includes, you know, those big guys, people in the middle, you know, because you got to see them, because it's hard to evaluate maybe a lineman from a wide shot. You know, it's like, well, how am I supposed to see what this guy's doing? That's what the end zone shot is for, that tight shot. And how are you going to evaluate, you know, a skill guy maybe that plays out on the flanks from a tight shot? So angles are important, you know, cutting them up so that it's one play sideline, the next play is the same play but doing the tight shot, so that they have both views to evaluate. And yes, a full game is important at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season, you know, because they want to see how the kid progress for a full season. You know, the highlight tapes are good in terms of getting them their attention. You know, oh, wow, that was a great highlight. Those are some great plays. Now, I wonder how many games that was, or, you know, if that was just a single game, 2, 3 games. But you definitely want to include your best game from the beginning of the season, and I'm sure they'll want to see something end of season to at least make sure you're still healthy and playing. Okay?
All right, sir, you had a question.
If you have a kid that wants to go to a Division III college, they want to go to Occidental, and you know, it was not clear that you don't want to hear from the parents, you want to hear from the kids. You're not going to get that. So to initiate that process, and say your kid says, you know, Occidental really on my short list, how would they call you, and how would they get your attention to? Because you probably get lots of video from kids that are sending out videos to every college out in the world, right? How would a kid get, like, hey, you know, I really am interested in you, and I really would like to get your attention to focus on me? How would they start that process and go about that without the parents putting you in videos?
Well, I should clarify. I do enjoy a phone call from a parent here and there, and it's always okay for a parent to contact me. I really like getting that personal email from the kid. It could have typos, I don't care. I love their personal impression of Oxy. So maybe they say, hey, I was checking out your website. I think you have a great UEP, Urban and Environmental Planning program. we speak in acronyms at Oxy. I noticed you guys just beat Whittier College last week. I'm really interested in what you're doing with your softball program and academics. If I read an email like that, I'm thinking, wow, this kid is plugged into what we're doing here. She has academic interests, and she's doing her homework. It's great for players to call me, and a lot of times they're intimidated to do that, but I try to always encourage them. Every time a player calls me, they're kind of like, hi, Coach Hanel, this is Susie Smith. I like softball, and I really like academics, and I want to come to Oxy. Okay, bye. And so I always tell them, thanks for calling. Let's talk about this. What position do you play? And most colleges will really try to encourage that, because the first personal connection we make with a player is our first insight into their character, into their interests, into what type of player they might be for me if they become a part of my program in the future. So I do think there is more of a tag team effort than I really focused on tonight. And some of the best questions I get come from parents. I love the embarrassing questions when a family's visiting Oxy. The dad that'll say, how does this co-ed dorm thing work? And the player's like, oh, Dad, come on. Those are real questions, and they're important questions. And the student might not realize that that's an important question to him or her at that moment. So there is definitely a place, and an important place, for parents in that conversation.
Make sure that the contact is also to the admissions office, not just through the coach. Then you're going to get a two-pronged attack. You'll have somebody in the admissions office who might also engage with that student, know about these other things, might then, even not knowing that the coach has been in touch, saying, I've just talked to this great kid, great softball player, and you can say, oh yeah, and it reinforces the seriousness of interest on both sides. I think what sometimes happens is coaches are the only point of contact, and the admissions office doesn't know that the kid even exists until the application arrives, and there's a really good opportunity for another set of advocates.
And I do want to say, as a caveat, we don't want you not to be a part of the process. We totally want you in there and supporting and asking questions, but we don't want you to butt in, as Bruce said, and get in between it. There's a balance for sure. Yes. Yes. I'm
Probably not, at least not that I'm aware of. What happens is the philosophy of the school generally will be pretty well expressed on those websites, but then you get down to coaches' philosophies and team philosophies, and those things can evolve and change, and personnel can change. So it's a little bit harder to know, I think, unless there's somebody who's been there for a pretty good amount of time.
It's networking too. It's talking to your high school coaches or club coaches that know people and know about programs, know a particular coach. Because sometimes, as Bruce was saying, there's a coach that's been there for a while and then he leaves and they bring in a new person that totally changes. So. Our coaches that were working with those guys at the time, yes. So, like if you see on that list, and Gary Williston's a great example, has worked with a lot of football coaches in these different areas and worked with these particular kids to get the right fit. Anita Drennan, same thing with volleyball. Steve Norberg in basketball land has his contacts that he's been through after coaching at Weber and a few other places. So you network and you talk, and then try and contact people that are at the school right now playing. And if they're alums from Chadwick, we can get you in touch with them. And that's a great way to really learn about that particular program, is talking to them. You know, if you want to go to USC, talk to Erin Owen. She's playing there right now. Let's give her a call or give her an email. You guys have anything else along those lines? Yes.
You had mentioned for the Division III schools, they're able to send out questionnaires starting freshman year. Is there a point would you recommend that, say, freshmen or sophomores, now that kind of know what type of program or academics they want, should they solicit for that questionnaire?
They could solicit for a questionnaire. I get a lot of player profiles, so you could create a player profile which would include a headshot, their uniform number, the name of their travel team, their high school information. I love it when it includes academic information, phone numbers for their travel coach or their high school coach, and that is as good to me as a questionnaire.
So that's like
Yeah, sometimes it's just a one-page sheet with the quick and dirty. You know, I like to play shortstop, this is my stuff, and we plug all of that into a database. Most coaches have a database where it's an amazing software. It keeps all sorts of information. We can blast emails to every 2015 graduate or every shortstop or everyone at Chadwick. So the more information we get from a student, the better. And just to reiterate that we can accept phone calls, we can make phone calls to freshmen. I would say that the culture of Division III is not to bombard freshmen, sophomores too much, but we're on the lookout.
And then, let's say, you're looking at college showcases and so forth, to contact, and say, I'm going to be at this college showcase. It looks like the coach will be there from their school.
Yes, oftentimes showcases require us to sign up and let them know if we're coming. And so before big tournaments, I always get tons of emails. I love it when a student will put in the subject, Susie Smith, 2014, shortstop. Great, so I know exactly who I'm reading, and she'll send me game time, she'll tell me the field location, and I really like to get those close to a tournament because I don't make my recruiting schedule for a given tournament until the week of. And so if I get a last minute email from somebody, I'm going to plug them in and I'm going to try to see them play.
I'm going to put a question myself about this. There are a lot of summer programs, there are a lot of summer camps. They seem to vary a great deal in purpose and in quality. Some of them are nice little cash cows for the people who are running them. Some of them are great opportunities to bring in other coaches and truly showcase athletes. In some sports, contact sports, it can be pretty hard contact, and the students could be putting themselves at some physical risk before a season. Others are a little bit more gentle in their approaches. What advice would you offer about how to look at those and how to sort out what's good from what may be dangerous?
Well, it's sometimes hard to evaluate what kind of camp a program is running, but I would encourage you, if you're not sure, to ask. At I think it's Division I, II, and III, the rule is that you can talk about your school, you can focus on the sport, but you shouldn't participate in any recruiting behaviors or tours or any special recruiting talks during camp. I would ask the coach, what do you do during camp? For Oxy, our camp is developmental. We focus on younger kids, and when we get a high school kid at our camp, we make sure that they're doing age-appropriate things. So an 18-year-old wouldn't be working on hitting with a 9-year-old. And it's a really great experience for that high school-aged kid because they get to work very closely with our staff. They get to learn about what a typical practice is. They get to ask us tons of questions while we're hitting or pitching or whatever we're doing. And so if you asked me, that's what I would tell you about my camp. But I know that my good friend coaches at Northwestern, their camp is huge. I work it almost every summer. They have hundreds of kids. That is a big fundraising effort for them, but they do balance the recruiting or non-recruiting component. When they have high school kids come in, some of them will have been invited. And if you get invited to camp, and you feel like that school is potentially at the top of your list, definitely go. It's such a good way to interact with coaches. But some coaches do send hundreds of invitations to kids to come to camp, and it's not really about it's more about making money or showing up or developmental things. So I would say only pay for camp and go if you are genuinely interested in that college. And it's always okay to ask, what do you do, especially at like a football camp or basketball, something that might be more rigorous and more contact and things like that. Coaches will tell you.
Yeah, one thing I would just add is these camps showcase usually take place during summer is make sure you're in shape, you know? Make sure when you go that you're going to perform and you're going to wow them, okay? Because you don't want to go after taking a whole month off because season ended, school ended, and you just haven't been doing anything except eating pizza and chips and soda. Because if you're interested in the school and the coach is genuinely interested in you and you have a pretty bad performance, it's going to turn them off. You know, they're going to be like, well, remember he came to our camp and just didn't really perform well, you know, was tripping all over his feet and his shoelaces were untied and, you know. So you want to make sure you yourself are prepared to go and perform and wow them. Something that obviously it seems like it's common sense, but it might get overlooked because some student athletes could just roll out of bed and, you know, high jump, 6 foot, who knows, but just a little reminder.
And also trying to figure out that balance of whether you're actually being invited because they're interested in you versus they're doing a blast to 1,000 people to try and get them to come to your camp. Okay, so that could be worth a phone call. If you get something like that, call and check in with the coach and see what they say. Yes, sir.
Can you address a little bit how schools think of athletics as an extracurricular activity versus the other things? Well, my daughter likes to play a sport every season. She's 3 sports a year. But when you do that, there's fewer other extracurricular things you're going to be able to do because there's so many hours in the day. Would a school look at that and say, oh, I wish she had done more things than just volleyball, basketball, softball?
You could put on my old hat. I'll put on my old hat. I worked for 30 years in undergraduate college admission, so we loved multi-sport athletes, and they are a dying breed. Because many schools and many programs are so geared to have a kid do one position in one sport. And the small colleges, even the bigger universities, they're not getting bigger. And the small colleges, if everybody's going to be a one-sport athlete and your student body's only about 300 in a class, you suddenly realize that there's real pressure if you're going to maintain all these different sports. I think college admissions officers know very, very clearly how much discipline and time and structure is involved in an athletic commitment. And when they see a student who's doing that much and showing real love of sport, it does translate in a lot of ways. Those tend to be very disciplined kids, for one thing. They have a lot of homework to do in a little time. And we know that it doesn't allow the time to plug into the 30-page resume. By the way, the 30-page resume is something that doesn't necessarily impress admissions officers so much anyway. What they're looking for is the handful of really serious commitments and long-term commitments, rather than this for this semester and that for that semester and hopping all over the place. But I think it's taken quite seriously.
I also wanted to say, and you brought this up a little bit earlier, and I do have a sample of this, is your daughter should start putting together a resume. If you're interested in pulling after that stuff, put together an athletic sports resume and write a cover letter. So we have a sample of that. And one of the do-nots thing is to write a coach and just say, hey, coach, or, a blast email that you're going to send to 15 colleges. You personalize it. If you go on a visit and you talk with coach or admissions, they love a handwritten note. That's a dying breed, right? But that's going to stand out. You write a nice thank you note and sign it and send it. Would you agree with me on that? That would probably stand out a little bit.
I will tell you, I have never gotten a handwritten note.
I mean,
You're right, Ally, she's gonna remember
I'll
it.
take a text or an email, that's perfectly fine, but I would be very impressed if I had a handwritten.
Yeah, so there's ways you can massage it too, and that's all just being respectful and kind and considerate. So,
I just had one more question. Since Division III does not offer athletic scholarship,
correct.
is there something where I heard from somebody if they really wanted an athlete and they're super great at school, are there academic
They're merit
scholarships
scholarships.
that are not financially driven?
There are merit scholarships where.
It's called merit.
Yeah.
What is a merit scholarship?
Truth. In a lot of cases, it's just a tuition discount because they're really interested in the kid. Maybe because of the high academic performance and they'd like to pull the profile up. Maybe it's because of the athletics, though they're not going to say so. It can mean a lot of different things. Originally, it was supposed to mean that for academics, high achievement in whatever wide variety of courses, or an achievement that is above and beyond the average admitted student at that school.
There's also a lot of work study programs too, where you can go and work in the library, for a discounted tuition. That's the.
People out here, should they go out and hire one of these agents to help them or assist them in this whole recruiting process?
So the question is, there are a lot of organizations or groups out there that they're trying to sign you up so that they can get you recruited. Okay, you guys want to address that? Anybody? My opinion is you don't need to spend your money, because we have a great team here that does that as well, and we know your child very, very well based on what they're doing here. Sometimes it's okay to go get a second opinion or ask somebody, but that's what we do too. That we're here to help you do that process.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tom. I myself get emails from these organizations. Hey, tell your student athletes we're hosting a workshop, and they and their parents, they should come, and it's only a $30 fee, and we can help them out and get them recruited. That's what playing's for, That's why you play the game. You can get recruited just from playing. That's what your coaches are for, You have the exposure at, certain tournaments or certain games, big high-profile games. College coaches are going to come, College coaches are coming in on this campus, in and out those offices. I feel at a school like Chadwick, the resources are all here for you, that you need, especially when you tap into that alumni base and, people that you've worked with in the past. At a school like Mater Dei, I mean, I could simply pick up the phone and call a college coach if I know that, that a kid has received some sort of contact from them, because they're receptive to me, and it's just a respectful relationship that we have. So it's the resources are there for you. And understand it's probably maybe a time thing as well. We just don't have the time to reach out to things that we need to get done. But I feel that maybe they're just not that necessary, because it all happens naturally as well. You think?
There's also some. It's the same idea with, and I'll get to you, Allie. Like with club coaches, for example, there are some really good club coaches out there that do a really good job of, having their kids get shown, but there's some club coaches that are going to tell you what you want to hear, and then they don't do anything about it. So do your research with the club coaches as well. Get to know who they are and what kind of person they are, because they're not guided by a whole lot of rules. In fact, they're in it it's a big business for them as well. So that's why we encourage your kids to take part in the high school program and supplement it with their club if that's what you want to do. Allie, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Just with regard to the recruiting services, I very much prefer getting an email from a student athlete. And as personal as those recruiting companies can make an email look, it's very clear if it's something that a kid typed to me, it's personal, or if it's that colorful, perfect, generic, I guess, email coming from a company. And don't get me wrong, if a student athlete is a great athlete and has the grades that I'm looking for, I'm not going to delete that email. I'm certainly going to respond and get in contact with them. But the student that contacts me personally is going to have sort of a priority, in my opinion, because it tells me that they're very serious about Oxy.
Yeah, Bob?
If I were tempted to use a service, it would be more to try to get the right match between my daughter and the school, not so much get her recruited by the school, but just matching up the kid to what school should she be going to? Because there's hundreds of great schools out there.
That's kind of what we do.
That you guys are looking and savvy and how to match it up with what the kid is about, and their needs, and their strengths.
Yes, I do believe so.
I mean, we have a college. We have a college and career counselor at Mater Dei, and she goes on counselor fly-ins to campuses across the nation every year, and she sits on 2 advisory boards as well, one at SMU and another at Villanova. So, you know, when these families go and they hire a future focus, you know, organization to help them with a college match, it's like, okay, well, that's good, but you have one right here in this office that has been on a lot of these campus tours and sets up these lunch visits with the admissions reps, you know, from schools all over the place. So I'm assuming it's pretty similar here.
Say something about that. Don't take the joy out of our jobs. That's what we love doing. That's a big part of, that interaction between student and counselor. We start working with them in the sophomore year. We get to know them then. In junior year, like senior year, it's magical. So, we just want Thank you.
Anybody else have a great question? Yes.
I was talking to a coach from UCLA about the GPAs and the academic standards that they were looking for. And he was explaining to me that they're taking primarily GPAs between like 3.2 and 3.4, and for like the athletes that they're very like heavily recruiting, or for the most part, and that's an average. And I was just wondering if that average changes or goes up for different divisions or different schools. I don't know.
I think that was that spreadsheet he was going to show you was part of it.
Yes, every GPA, every SAT will vary from school to school. And also, it will vary from student athlete to student athlete. You know, how bad does this coach want you on their campus, you know, and are they really going to push for you to get through admissions if you don't have that strong of a GPA or ACT, SAT score? So yeah, I mean, it even varies from sport to sport as well. So rule of thumb, just keep your grades high and score well.
And that senior year is important too. I mean, a lot of people, they've done their application and they think it's over and I'm going to just kind of relax for that senior year. But you got to keep up those grades because they will go back and look. Sorry to bum you out there. Anybody else have questions? Great questions, you guys. I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I want to say thank you for our panel for being